February session here. And our speaker today, Rob Wellman. All right, Rob, take away.
Sounds good. Okay, thanks everyone for joining me today. What we're going to talk about is a new JavaScript SDK that's being built out by the Sitecore Product Team currently. And the aim of it basically is to enable you to get Sitecore Discovered integrated into your solution and up and running as quickly as possible. My name's Rob Earlham. I currently lead Sitecore's developer advocacy team. I've been working for Sitecore for about 7 years now in a couple of different roles, but I've been working with Sitecore products for pretty much my whole career. I first certified back in 2006, and I've worked on a whole bunch of customers and partners, both in the UK and now down in Australia where I'm based. You can see a bunch of different social accounts there, so if you want to get hold of me after this, feel free to add me on any of those and give me a shout and say hello. Okay, so what are we going to cover today? Well, we're going to give a little brief introduction to what Sitecore Discover is. I'm not going to go too deep onto Discover itself, but we are going to talk a little bit about the implementation options that you have, because there's a few different ways you can integrate Discover into your commerce experiences. And after that, we're basically going to drill down then into the JavaScript SDK. So we're going to talk about what's included in there and the two different models of interaction we have, which is how you can send event data into Discover, which is then used to train all the AI and power all these experiences you're going to build, and then how you can create these components that deliver those experiences. So what is Sitecore Discover? Well, if you go to the dev portal today, this is basically the description we have on there, the first 2 lines that I copied down. It's basically an AI-powered product discovery optimization engine. So anywhere you have product listings, it allows you to include kind of smarts in the background to tailor those product listings to the person viewing them. So this is all omni-channel, it's all headlessly delivered. So if you're doing this for mobile, web, email, anywhere you basically have product listings, you can deliver these tailored, personalized product listings powered by the AI behind inside of Sitecore Discover. And it does this with a whole heap of different features. Basically, what you're trying to do is give this really fine-grained level of control back to the merchandiser, controlling what products are displayed where and when. And you can then also test these different theories you have in there. So you can run personalization tests, A/B tests, and tailor your listings to certain products, to certain customer segments, and then basically see which are performing better before you roll it out to the rest. The idea is basically, you can kind of boost products you want to see, which you think are going to drive sales, and then kind of bury ones which aren't applicable to the customer browsing the site. Really, as I said before, giving power back to the merchandiser. So implementation options. When it comes to Discover, there's 3 different ways you can actually implement Discover today. The first one of those is with something called hosted pages. And with this, you provision a reverse proxy or even a subdomain of your site, for some customers do. And those basically point directly to Discover's servers. And we host those pages ourselves. And the thing that this does is you'll notice it's quite low on the vertical developer effort axis here on this very loosely made graph. And that's because once you've provisioned this reverse proxy or the subdomain, you can control what's in those pages, what content's in there, how the products are listed, all via the admin section of Discover, which is called the Customer Engagement Center, which we're going to see a little later on. You will notice, though, that limited developer effort does reduce in a little bit of a reduction in the feature availability. So that's the bottom axis we're looking at here, the horizontal one. So if you go for this easier to implement solution, you don't actually have access to the complete feature set that Discover has available. Kind of the polar opposite end of the implementation options is a direct API integration. So with this choice, the developer is basically doing all of this integration work for you. And that is why we've gone right to the top end of the developer effort. Your developers and your development team as a whole, they're going to have to be deeply involved throughout building out these experiences, and you're going to be reliant on them to perform a lot of that. You'll notice, though, we're now also fully to the right of the horizontal axis, and that increase in development effort does unlock the full feature suite that Discover has to offer. The good thing, though, is there is a middle ground between these two, and that's what we're going to talk about today, which is the new JavaScript SDK. It's currently in beta, And as with the API approach, you'll see we're all the way to the right of that horizontal axis. So you get full availability to the full feature set that Sitecore Discover has available. But you'll notice there's not quite as much developer effort involved. And that's because this SDK is going to do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. A lot of the boilerplate type code you're going to have to write with these API calls, they're all handled out of the box now. So it's going to reduce the amount of time required to build out these experiences quite dramatically. So let's start to take a look at what's in it. Well, as I said, so this is still in beta, and it's a React library. So if you're building with plain React or a framework based on React like NextJS, this is going to be the way you want to go. However, if you're building with another JavaScript library like Angular or Vue or Svelte, or another language completely, maybe you're in .NET or in Go or any of the other languages out there, you can still use Discover, that's not a problem, but you won't be able to use this SDK. You're going to have to either go for the hosted pages method or for the direct API integration method itself. What the SDK does give you is complete control over how you design these different experiences with Discover though. And the nice thing about it is it allows you to basically dial where the control lives. So you can have it more developer controlled if that's the way you want to run things, or you can dial it more to the merchandiser side and have them more in control of what experiences get displayed where on the site. And it comes with basically two main feature sets. And those are the two NPM libraries you can see at the bottom of this slide here. The first one, the React NPM package, is what powers all of the eventing model, which is what you use to train the AI behind the scenes and build up this rich set of data inside your Discover instance. And then the UI library is what's used to build components and experiences based on that data that you've put into Discover. So before I dig too much into it, I just want to talk a little bit about the scenario we're going to go through today. Now, obviously, you can take Sitecore Discover and put it over a brand new, fresh greenfield project, and it'll be really easy to do that. But what I wanted to show today is how easy you can layer it on top of an already live e-commerce site. We're going to be using NextJS Commerce today with Order Cloud on the back end. And I like this example because NextJS is open source. You can go and create an account with Vercel today. Order Cloud has trials as well. You can go and set up a trial there. So it's really easy to get these two set up. But everything I'm going to show you today would work just as well over Shopify or Salesforce Commerce Cloud or any of the other commerce platforms out there today. Another thing it shows as well, which I quite like, is how you can get the benefit with Next.js and Discover of both static site generation on the Next.js side and also augmenting that with certain elements of dynamic generation as well, kind of getting the best of both worlds. So how does that work? Well, with standard Next.js Commerce, Vercel will come along, and when you need to do a build, it'll pull your code out of your GitHub repository, and it'll pull your commerce data out of Order Cloud. And it combines those two things together to generate a load of static assets, things like HTML, JavaScript, CSS. There's also things like fonts and images, everything that you need to run a site. And these are all then deployed and cached on their globally available CDN. You then come along as a customer, and you access the site, which is hosted on this CDN. And because it's all globally available and pre-built, this is all blazingly fast to work, basically. You get those pages super quickly. And this basically set up here now is how static site generation works. You're offloading the expense of building these pages to build time instead of to run time. And that's how you get really fast responses. With commerce scenarios, you generally have a lot of interactivity as well. And it's the same for Next.js Commerce. So you're going to have calls from the browser back to your Order Cloud system. And that's going to be for things like adding products to cart, going through the checkout flow, anything where the user's doing dynamic interactions. There's usually a middleware layer in between there as well. It might not go directly from the browser to Order Cloud, but requests are going to get routed from the user through to your ecom platform of choice. And this is basically a standard Next.js Commerce setup. That is kind of what you're looking at here. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take Discover and we're going to lay that on top. And how does that work? Well, as the user's browsing the site, once you've added Discover into it, it's going to start sending events into Discover. And that's then going to be used to populate all of these experiences that we're going to start to build with it. And those are what are returned through catalog and component data back to the front end. So I do want to call out a couple of things in advance. So I have set up a couple of things ahead of time just to get things going a little quicker. So we're going to be using Next.js Commerce. When you use Next.js Commerce out of the box, you only get about 4 products, which when you're demonstrating a catalog system like this isn't really enough. So the demo team here have kindly lent me their catalog and Discover instance. So I've changed the catalog out to one with about 100 odd products in there. There's a difference around those. And that has already been synced into my order card instance and already synced into the Discover instance I'm using. So they're ready in line, basically ready to go for what we're going to build out. And today, we're basically going to be focusing on this part here. NextJS Commerce is already set up. It's already configured for us. We're just going to be laying Discover on top of it. And the first thing we're going to be doing is working with events. So when you go to implement Discover on a new site, this is going to be the first thing you're going to want to do. And the nice thing about working this way is you can do it in a phased approach. Like you can start tracking these events way before you even start thinking about what componentry, what experiences you want to build. And it's really nice to do that because it means that then if you come to add a recommendation widget or a best-selling product widget in a month's time or 6 months' time when you decide what you want to do, your data is already populated in Discover. It's already ready to go. So you're going to have realistic data from day one as soon as you launch that. If you look at the table on the right here, this is lifted directly from the documentation sites. This is all public data. You can see the events which are provided as part of the SDK. And if you look at the top 6 or so in the right-hand column, you'll see it says yes by JS SDK for React. What that means is that you don't have to configure those yourself. As soon as you add the SDK into your solution, those events will automatically be tracked and automatically sent into Discover. The bottom rows, though, you have to wire those up yourselves. So things like adding the product to the cart, order confirmation, product detail page views. Each application can be quite different in how it handles those. So you have to manually call those. The SDK has helpers to help you with that, but it is something you have to do yourself. After you've done all that though, and you have this data coming in, then you can start to look at the componentry. And there's 3 different ways that you can basically add components to a site based on Discover. The first is kind of what we're calling static components. And these are created in the CEC, and they're dropped at a very specific place in the DOM by a developer. So they're going to say, I'm going to take component number 1, I'm going to put it over here. I'm going to take component number 2, I'm going to put it over here. They're statically placed, they're always going to appear in that same spot. Next up, we have the concept of dynamic components, which use a generic widget tag. And what these allow you to do is basically define an area on a page where you can go into the CEC and just start dropping components in. It feels very similar to like a placeholder if you're working in XM Cloud. So that's kind of the way I've been thinking about it logically. But this is what I talked about before, where you can basically dial control between the developer and the merchandiser. So static components, they're quite developer focused. They're going to control where those exist and where they land. Dynamic components, you're giving control back to the merchandiser a bit more. They can dynamically add and remove components into an area on the page. The last way to do it is with a global component. So global components exist on every page of the site. And a good example of this, which we're going to take a look at shortly, is, for example, a search bar in a header. It's going to be the same on every page. There may be some pages where you don't have it, like a checkout flow or something, but it's not going to be different between the home page to the product detail page to the product listing page. It's always going to be there and present, the same widget globally across those pages. We're going to take a look at some of the documentation that you get with Discover as well and this new SDK. And that comes in the form of Storybook. And that's really nice. So that basically lets us, it gives us basically a full overview of all the UI components that are provided with the SDK, an example code of how to implement them all. So you can copy and paste it straight into your application, really quick and easy to get up and running, and awesome for doing quick POCs if you just want to test how things work. We're going to take a look at a CLI as well. We have a CLI to help you provision these components quickly also. And yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff we're going to take a look at. So I think it's probably time we dive straight into it. Okay, so I've got my solution open here in Visual Studio Code. And this is an instance of NextJS Commerce for anyone who hasn't used it before. We have a site folder in here, and this is basically where the site itself actually exists. So I'm going to start by bringing up my terminal here, and it uses the pnpm package manager for this. And we're just going to run a dev instance. We're going to try to. Oh, give me a second. I think I need to run it from within the terminal first. Obviously, you can see what I'm doing. Let's just make sure I open that again. Wait for the terminal to start up. fingers crossed, we will have this working now. That was a little healthier. Okay. So this is going to run a development instance of, yes, sir. And I need to go into the site folder first. Then we need to run the npm dev. Okay. Now we can bring up a browser and it's over here. It's the localhost 3000. So this is an instance of NextJS Commerce running locally on my machine. We haven't introduced Discover yet. It's just a standard NextJS Commerce instance. And basically everything's running through static site generation. I'm running development mode locally, so it's not going to be doing static site locally. It's going to build each page as I click on it. But when I deployed it, will be doing static sites. For anyone who's run NextJS Commerce before, you'll notice my catalog is different now. It's the catalog from the Play Summit demo instances, as I mentioned. And we can scroll down. It's a pretty standard e-com site. We've got a HTML banner up here. We've got a marquee with some products, text banner, some more products here, more marquees. And we can click through and we can go and view an actual product detail pages as well. As I said, it's going to be a little slower running locally in dev mode, but you get the idea. You know, it's a fully functioning e-commerce site, standard B2C that we've all kind of used before. So let's start to integrate some eventing in here. Let's start to integrate our SDK. I've already added the NPM packages into my site. So what I'm going to do is, I'm out of the way. I'm going to go down first, and we're going to start to integrate it into the application. And the first thing we need to do is to go and edit our app_app.tsx. And this is basically a wrapper for the Next.js application. So every page that gets rendered is going to be rendered inside of this application. So if you need to do anything at a global application scope in Next.js, this is where you can do that. And what we're going to do first is we're going to wrap the whole application in a widget provider. And what that does is that basically allows us to start making this application SDK aware, if you like. I'm going to have to add in some references as I go. We're using TypeScript here, and the environment is basically a types enum equivalent. So I need to add the type for the environment. But then you add these keys in, which basically what ties this application into which instance of Discover. So we have an environment here, and then I've previously set up my environment variables, my .env file with my customer key and my API key, which you can get out of the customer engagement console. We can save that. And that's all we need to do to start sending off those automatic events. If I deployed this out now to Vercel, anyone browsing the site would automatically start registering those 6 events at the top of that table before. Before we're going to see that in action, I'm just going to wire up some of the manual ones as well, so we can take a look at those. The first one I'm going to do is the product detail page view. So if we go and look at our slug page in here, this is the page which is rendered for every product detail page when you go and access it. And to be able to record events basically into the product detail, or record the product detail page view events, we're going to use the use effect hook. And this just slots into the main method here. Again, we're going to pull in our references. And you can see the events method here, the event function, is coming out of that React library that we talked about before. That's the library that provides all of this event management for you. And it's as easy as that. You know, we pass in the ID of the product we're viewing. We can save that. And now any pages that you want to view will automatically, any product view pages that happen will automatically get registered in Discover. Another one of the ones we had to do was adding product to the cart. So let's go and take a look at that one as well. We go to components, the product, that actually exists in the product sidebar, I think it is. Yeah. This is a little different. So with this one, we actually need to add a couple of things. First of all, we're going to need to know the path of the page we're running from. So we're going to create an instance of the next router, which is going to give us access to that data, basically. It's as path variable. And then we're going to have a bit of code, which is going to get called at the end of the add to cart function. So when a user clicks the add to cart button, it calls this add to cart page, add to cart function here. That's going to go and physically add the product to the cart in Order Cloud. That needs to happen because that's what powers the actual e-commerce experience that the user's getting. What we want to do is when that's finished, we're going to drop our Discover code in here. Again, we're adding in a reference from the React library. There again. And what we do here is we basically build this product event model. So we're telling it we're going to add this product ID, the SKU, the quantity. For now, I've just hard-coded it as 1, but you could dynamically set that if needed, and the price at which it was added as well. Finally, we call another one of these out-of-the-box functions that the SDK provides, used to track the cart event. Passing that event model, and as we said, the page we're running from, which is this as path thing. Okay, I think it's time to see this in action. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the dev tools here. And if I go and view my product page, maybe, well, let's do the home page first, and we'll see the automatic event. That's probably a better way to do it. So we're going to track the page calls in here. And I've just limited it to dynamic, XHR requests here. And you can see we have one through here, which goes to the reflection service. And this is the request from the home page. So we can go through here, and this is one of the automatically wired events I talked about. This is a standard page view event. I viewed the page. I didn't have to wire this up at all just by adding that widget provider. That is what enabled this. We also get this UUID here, and that's my unique identifier as a customer. So what we can do is we can go and we can load up the CEC. I'm going to go and log into Discover now. So we've loaded into the Play Summit. As I said before, the demo team are kindly letting me share their demo instance. And this is the back end for Discover. This is the CEC. There's heaps of things and features in here. We're not going to touch on all of them today. The first thing I want to show is the developer resources, though. And I'm going to go and load up this event monitor. And the nice thing about this is it allows you to track what events an individual user is triggering. So this was the UUID I copied before out of my dev tools. I can select to start monitoring. I go back and just refresh my page here. See the request come through. We can see the request made over to reflection. If I go back to my event monitor, we can see it rendered here. So this is really nice for debugging kind of what's going on behind the scenes. You can go into the event details, see all the properties that were passed over, get full details on basically what's being sent into Discover. So let's keep going. The next thing we did was we wired up the product detail view, didn't we? So let's go and click on this set of golf clubs here. This is going to load the product detail page. And we can see we have another request over to reflection. If we take a look inside here, it's another view event, but this time the type is of PDP, product detail page. We go and expand that. We're going to expand, here we go. We can see the SKU that I added that was populated and sent over. If we go back into the CEC, we can see that event's been tracked as well. And again, we can go down and we can see the event data being posted in here, the SKU that was added. The final thing we did was add to cart as well, wasn't it? So we can do that too. We can trigger the add to cart function. That's physically added it to my cart. You can see there's already one in there from when I tested this earlier on. So if we go and we look at the next one, we can see again, we have a different type of event now. It's an A2C event, add to cart. If we go into here, we can see that object, that event object that I built before with the price, the quantity, and the SKU, all that data being sent over. We can go and view that in the CEC again. Here we can see the event details, and we can scroll down and see that event data in there. You'll notice that there's two add to cart events here, one generated by Sitecore, one generated by the customer. So what that means is, or how it was explained to me by the product team, is the customer one is what's generated by the site itself. And that happens when I send that A to C event, it actually gets put in an event queue. That's an event that needs processing. And the generated by Sitecore one is when it actually got processed by the event queue. So for some events, you may see dual records in here, but it does only correspond to a single analytics row on the back end. So you're not double logging. Don't have to worry about that. And there we have it. Like if I was doing a phased implementation of Discover, that'd be my phase one. I'd obviously wire up the other events like order confirmation and all the others that I had to do myself. But you can see it's really simple, like 5 minutes and we have all our data flowing from our site into Discover. And that powers basically the actual power of Discover after that. Now we can start to take that data and leverage it to build out our components and our experiences. And that's what we're going to do next. So before I hop over to that, I think we'll take a look over at Storybook first. So as I said, for any of you who haven't worked with Storybook before, it basically allows you to export an SDK as a whole, basically, in order to generate documentation in a really nice way. So you get your introduction, showing how you can get started with the SDK, and then we can go and start to look at all the different components included in there. The widgets provider that we just looked at, you can see it's defined in here. You can see there's actually different ways to configure that widget definer. All of the properties are explained to you, how you can leverage it to get the most out of it. We're going to be looking at the components today. So if we go down to here, you can see an introduction to the different components that are available. You can see we have SEO components, we have banner components, HTML blocks, there's recommendation components, search components, preview search components, and you get examples on how to implement these as well. An interesting one I quite like, which we're going to look at a little bit, is the generic widget. This is the one I was talking about, which kind of functions a little bit like a placeholder. So you can insert any widget tags into there. One key thing to remember is this sentence up here. So the SDK knows beforehand how to render HTML blocks, banners, and SEO widgets. However, it does not know how to render recommendations, search results, and preview search results. What that means is you need to tell your application, when I create a recommendation widget in the CEC, you need to go and use this specific component out of my application. Otherwise, it doesn't know how to render it, basically. It's fairly straightforward to do, and we'll see that in action shortly, though. Once you scroll down, you can see you get definitions for all the different UI elements available. So you can see there's accordions, there's carousels, you get examples of how they're going to look. And down at the bottom, you get examples of templates. So these will take those UI components and combine them into larger, more complete pieces of functionality. For example, preview search and search results, which we're going to take a look at a little bit later on. So I think next is probably good to go and take a look at how this is configured in the CEC. So we've got these different components we've defined, but we need to create them in. We need to define what it is we want to display. And to do that, we go to this widget setting in the CEC. And you will see there's a whole heap that have been defined in here. There's a couple at the top we're going to be working with today, which have my initials, REA, prefixed on them. And we've got a homepage banner and a recommended set of prompts. We'll start with the homepage banner. This is basically a super simple piece of HTML, which is going to replace the banner on the homepage. If we go into the settings, we can see how this is configured. I've selected a 3-image banner with a 1:2 split, this one's called, and you can see an example of how this is going to be rendered out. If we go to the edit section, we can control what's rendered. So the appearance is the first piece, and you get a whole heap of these different banners provided for you out of the box. So you can see we're going to use this one now. Well, there's loads of different styles you can choose from. And you get to customize the text, the imagery, the links, everything about how these are rendered. You can also completely create your own appearances from scratch that'll then appear in this list. If we go back again, you can see we have 3 images for this. So this appearance template basically has a series of settings for it. So each of these images are an anchor. So we're going to choose where they're going to link to. That's the link to the product with the SKU. And then we're going to use a product image. So that's coming out of our DAM. And we have 3 different instances of those for the 3 different images. We leave this and we go back and take a look at the other widget. Here we have the recommended product widget. And this is basically going to display us a list of products that are going to be displayed on the site. I've kept this super simple. I'm just using a recipe here to randomly choose 9 products. Well, there's a whole heap of different recipes you can choose from. Again, if I go to choose another from here, you can see you could do top ordered products for 30 days. You could do products that were featured in abandoned carts. You can do similar products. And if you look at the size of my scroll bar here, it is super tiny. Like this list goes on and on and on and on. And there's a whole heap of different out-of-the-box recipes that you can choose. And you can also build your own custom recipes as well. I've kept it simple for today, and we're just going to show a set of random products basically on the page. So we've got these different widgets defined. Next, we need to define how they're going to be rendered on the page. One other thing to remember is they all have an ID. So RFK ID 92, for example, is my recommended product. If I go back to the widgets page here, we'll see REA home banner is the home banner. And these are all unique IDs that allow you to directly refer to one. But we're going to be working with pages. So what we've done here is we've defined a homepage called REA homepage, which is what we're going to use to tailor the content on the landing page of our site. And if we go into here, we can see we have a first variation. And this is where you can start to do testing here. So you can create different variations, split the traffic between the two, have rules showing which variation is showing to different people. We're just going to stick with one variation today. We're not going to go too much into that. But when you load it up, you get a preview of how this is going to look. These are the fields that I've populated before, my product images, and the anchors are set to them. And then we can see we get a recommendation panel below. Okay, so how do we start to actually integrate this into our site? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at dynamic components. And this is the one that's merchandiser controlled. So this is basically where you can basically create an area on the page where you can say, kind of like a placeholder, I'm going to insert my widgets into this area. And if we go back and take a quick look at the site first, actually, and go back to the home page, we'll go to the dev tools for now. Now, as I said, this is all statically generated. This first piece here is statically generated, and this is above the fold. So I reckon I'm going to leave this as statically generated because the dynamically generated content is going to be loaded in later with a little loading message. So I'm going to keep the first bit of content visible. And then if we scroll further down, we've got a similar thing here, 3 images, and then we've got a carousel underneath the products. So I'm going to replace this with those different widgets that we just took a look at. I'm going to pull this one out, and we're going to drop those 2 widgets in there via the placeholder style method. So we're going to go back to VS Code now. And the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to go back to my app template. And remember, one of the widgets we created was a recommendation widget. And it said, the SDK guy told us that the SDK itself doesn't know how to render those widgets itself. We have to tell it. So that's what we're going to do first. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this hook in here to set the widget type. Again, we're going to add in my references. And what I'm going to reference here is this generic recommendation. And if I look up here in my components folder, I have a bunch of Discover components that I created ahead of time. What we're saying here is that anytime you get a widget that's a recommendation type, if I don't explicitly tell you to use a specific component to render that widget, fall back and use my generic recommendation widget, which is this top one here. So if we take a look at my generic recommendation widget, basically, we're going to use this use recommendation method in here, which is going to make the request over to Discover to get my products. Once we have them, we then basically map through this product collection and render out the product card itself. So pretty simple stuff. I'm going to make sure I save this before I move ahead. So let's start to drop some widgets on some pages. As we said, we're going to be working with our homepage here. So if I go back up to the top, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add in the use effect hook again. That drops into here. Spacing. And again, we're going to add in our references. So use effect comes from React. And then we'll start to pull in these page elements. Okay, so what are we doing here? Well, we're going to fire the use effect hook when the page loads. We're then going to get the page controls from the SDK, and it's going to get the context for the page we're trying to render. And this is where we pass in the name of the page, the REA home we created before. That's how we're tying this route in the application. So that definition of a page in Sitecore Discover. After that, we call the use page widgets function, and that's going to get us our widget data for that page. And it returns us back an object with 2 properties. It gives us the isLoading property because it's an asynchronous function. So while it's getting that data, the isLoading will be set to true. When the data is complete and it's come back, isLoading will be set to false, and the widgets will be populated inside of there. So let's start to use it. So it was the second grid. I wanted to leave the first grid as being static. That was above the fold. So we're going to go down here. We have the marquee, then we have the hero text. This grid here, this is what I was going to replace. So I'm going to comment that out. And I'm just going to drop this code in, and we'll take a look at what this is doing. So first of all, we have this initial code piece here. We're saying, while this is loading is true, we're just going to render a div that says loading. You could have a spinner in there, whatever you want, just something to show that this content is going to come in the future. Then when isLoading is false, that'll fails, that'll be hidden. And the inverse, the line below passed. This is now false, it's not loading. and we're going to map our widgets. So we're going to say for each widget I have, I'm going to render this generic widget container. I'll import this. And that is now going to render each of the widgets that I've returned into a widget container. If we save this, go back to Discover, we get our loading panel here. I love hot reload, it's so cool. And you can see we now have our static widget in here, both of them, one after another. That was the order that they were defined in the CEC. So that's the order they're rendered here. If I go into the CEC and remove one of these, it'll no longer appear here. Coincidentally as well, I can also go and add other widgets here. And this is where you're dialing control over to the merchandiser. They can go and dynamically add components to and from this area on the page now. But I mentioned a little bit about static component placement as well. And that's the next thing I wanted to look at. So we have this recommendation widget here, and it's right next to this marquee here, which looks a bit funny. I don't like that. But this scrolling marquee here, yeah, that's below the fold. I want to replace this scrolling one here with the content from this widget here. That's my aim. So what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to change this at all. I'm going to go up to the top marquee here. We will comment this out. I'm going to add in a marquee, do that, but a marquee recommendation component. This is another component which has been added ahead of time. It's very similar to the generic recommendation one we just looked at, but instead it's rendering it inside of a marquee tab, basically. So we're going to get that nice scroll effect. And we've targeted this specifically with a widget ID. Remember the RFK ID 92 is my recommendation widget. So this is what I was talking about with like static placement. So here the developers come along and he said, I want RFK ID 92 to render this specific DOM location. It'll always be that widget. It'll always be that location. It'll always be that type of widget as well. So it'll always be a marquee recommendation. We can go and refresh the page now. I'll actually do a full page refresh this time. And we can see the loading. So we get a loading here and below. And we can see we now have the same product listing we had before, but it's now rendered inside of a nice marquee below. The thing I like about this too is you'll notice the double rendering of it here is no longer happening, or we don't ever get the double rendering. The SDK is smart enough to know that RFK ID 92 has already been rendered elsewhere in the DOM, so it won't re-render it here. You won't get the double rendering. So it gives you a bit of belt and braces support to make sure you're not duplicating content. Okay, so I like that. That's pretty cool. That's dynamic content, that's static content. The third one we wanted to look at was global widgets, widgets that appear on every page. And the example I talked about was preview search. And there is a search box up here, but if you look, it's pretty basic. There's kind of no real dynamic functionality. It's not that exciting. We can do better. I'm going to hop back to Storybook here. And as I mentioned, we have templates at the bottom. We're going to start with template search. And we're going to look at the left menu first. And you can see you can get a full demo of it in action. So I can go and click on it here and I can test. It's a different catalog than we're using. It's the generic catalog. You can see you get full functionality here, testing what we want to do. I'm happy with that. Let's go and implement it. So we can go to templates and we're going to do the preview search left styled. And the styled ones are based on a concept called style components, which allows you to basically provide functionality in a JavaScript file and then another JavaScript file to apply some basic styling to it. It's not going to match your site 100%, but it's going to get you like 70% of the way there, which is great for testing functionality, doing POCs, and getting somewhere getting it functionally correct so that you can then pass it off to a designer to finish off properly. If we hop back into VS Code, I've already added this in ahead of time, again, just to save a bit of time. So we can see I've added my preview search left style. This is the JavaScript file we just looked at. I haven't changed it. The only thing I've changed is to wire up the event for the button clicks, for where that's going to go. And then we've also added in the style.js. Again, unchanged from what was available in Storybook. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my navbar component. And this is where my search preview exists. This is the out-of-the-box search bar. And I'm going to replace that with my new preview search. Get rid of both of these. This is the mobile version. And there we go. I can save my page. I can go back to the site. And with hot reload, if you're very observant, you'll have noticed that the search button has hopped to the other side. But I can now click on this, and I now get dynamic preview search. So I can go in here and I can search for cycling, and it starts to give me cycling products. It even makes suggestions. Did I mean cycling bottle? Was that actually what I was searching for? Really nice, really quick to get rich functionality. Another example of this is with search results. If I go and actually do my search, then this is going to take me over to the generic NextJS Commerce search results page. It's okay, but it's all hard-coded. It's all managed purely by the developer. I want to give some control back to the merchandiser in the Discover CEC. So what I can do for that, we can go back to Storybook again. We can go back to here, and we have our search results in here. We have a few different types. I think we were going to go for the standard basic one in this one. Again, you can click on the row here. Is it going to show me? Oh, it's thinking about it. Here we go. So we're going to get a set of search results. There's going to be some facets, count. We're going to get sorting and pagination as well. We can go to the templates, and it's going to be the search results basic style. That's the one we're looking at here. Again, you get your functionality JavaScript, you get your styling JavaScript. I've added these ahead of time. So if we go and take a look in my Discover folder somewhere, we have our search results in here, our basic and our styles. So we can just start to implement them on our pages. I'm going to go down to our search page. It's a super basic implementation on the standard NextJS Commerce page. So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of that. And we're going to import our Discover components. We'll get rid of the old search definition. We don't want that. And we're going to import our layout. You'll notice this, just like the navbar one, is tied to a specific widget within the CEC, and that's how the merchandiser can get control to basically tailor what's displayed in here. But it's as easy as that. We can now go back over to our site, and straight away, it's all automatically refresh the page for me. Hot reload, it's amazing. But you can see the styling's not perfect. 70% of the way there, I think that's probably fair. But we get full faceting, all available now, all powered by the products in here. The sort's all available. You get a count, you get a page result count, you get pagination, and all of this is dynamically controllable by the CEC. So you can control which facets are displayed. You can control which sort orders there are, how pagination works, the page sizes that are available. And you get rich data being sent back on how users interact with it as well, which is then used to power further experiences. So it's a fully cyclical event type thing we're having here. Okay, so I do have one more thing left to show, and that is the CLI. So I mentioned that there's a few different ways that you can interact with the SDK and how you can get running with these different components. Storybook's one of them, really nice way to do things. But if you don't want to copy and paste code, you can use a CLI to create those same products, the same components, sorry. You'll notice I have this SC search discover settings JSON in here. This basically defines the path where my components are. So I'm putting all my Discover ones in a Discover folder. Whether you do that in real life, I'm pretty torn. It depends how far down the Discover path you're going, I guess. But for now, they're going to get put in there. And once you have that, you can basically go npx sc discover new widget. And this is going to start a flow, which is going to allow us to create a new widget. So it's going to go through, and this is basically going to allow us to choose first the language. The nice thing here is you can choose TypeScript. Currently in Storybook, we only have JavaScript examples, and TypeScript ones are coming. But for now, we have, if you want TypeScript out of the box, you've got to use the CLI. And then you can go and choose what you want. So we could go and say we want a different style of recommendation. We want to go for a recommendation carousel now instead. We can choose our carousel style. It's double checking here. It's found the settings file. Do we want to create them in this location? Yes, we do. And we'll call this recommendation carousel. I should pick one with a shorter name next time. And it's as easy as that. We now have a fully working style TypeScript file in here. So here's all the functionality based in TypeScript for a carousel recommendation and the associated styling for it. So that will pull in all of the styles. Again, getting you 70% of the way there, which is really good. Getting you up and running, getting you started really, really quickly. So that's pretty much all of the code samples I had to show today. I've just got one more slide to round things out, and then we'll open it up for questions. I've really enjoyed working with Discover on this. This is the first time I've really got my head across Discover. I got exposed to it, and it's been really nice. One of the things I've really liked about it is that you really can do as much or as little with Discover as you like. You know, we have customers who basically do 100% of their catalog listing. Anytime a product's shown, it's coming from Discover. They've gone all in on it, and they're getting great value from it. At the other end of the scale, you know, we have customers who are really selective with their Discover usage, really targeted usage of certain catalog listing elements across their different experiences. And there's everything in between, you know? You really can dial it up or down to fit your use case. Another thing I really liked was just how easy it was to implement this over an existing e-commerce solution. As I said at the start, obviously it'd be really simple to roll this in from the beginning, greenfield style. But if you have an existing e-com storefront, you can lay this on top super simply. It's really quick and easy to get going. The JavaScript SDK is in beta. So currently it is available though. So when you start working with Discover, you'll basically be assigned a Discover implementation expert to help you along the way. If you speak to them, they'll get you access to the SDK, get you access to Storybook and the docs and everything to get you up and running. And, you know, you have lots of support if you do choose that. As I mentioned, you know, Storybook's there, the CLI's there, everything really to get you up and running as quickly as possible. Yeah, I've really enjoyed working with the SDK. It's been really good. I'm looking forward to seeing what people can build with it. Okay, I think that's enough of me talking now. I'm going to have a quick sip of my drink. Does anyone have any questions?
That's great, Rob. Yeah, we do have some questions. So Chris asked a question, is there plans to support other JavaScript framework later?
Yeah, so we're in talk about what languages and what frameworks to support with the SDK next. So as I said, React's first off the conveyor belt line, that supports React. Other frameworks based on React, like NextJS. The team are actually working next on search, Sitecore Search, not Discover, and very similar SDK for that as well. So it's going to give this time for this SDK to settle a bit, get it into some customers' hands, get feedback from it, and then we're going to figure out where to go with it next, whether it's another JavaScript library or maybe it's another programming language altogether. We haven't figured that out yet, but there are talks about where to take it next.
You may want to talk to the guys over at American Eagle, because they're doing a lot with the different JavaScript libraries, and they've been doing a lot of porting stuff for like Order Cloud and for different other things from different ones, and so they may be proficient to be able to help you. Like if you provided them the code to this library and say, hey, you know, if you guys want to move it over to Angular or you want to move it over to, you know, whatever, then they can. I know that they're doing that stuff. So the other question that I had was, I noticed for like say the search component, when you were putting that in there, there's no real other events that you're allowing to be grabbed. Was that just because it was a simplified demo, or can you actually grab the click event, or can you grab the hover event and do other things?
Yeah, so the code I put in is basically just sample code. It's designed to get you started, but you have full access to the component code. So you can go and fire off events to other systems, do whatever you want, basically. This is designed to get you, as I say, 70% of the way there, and then you kind of tailor it to fit your exact needs.
Okay, cool. Because I just wanted to make sure, because some of the other Sitecore JavaScript libraries are very tight, and then you can't get in. And so I wasn't sure if it was just that way or whether it was just the way your demo is. But that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool.
I have more questions.
Yeah, I have a question too. So yeah, so you mentioned so there's Sitecore Discover and there's Sitecore Search, which is the new one, right?
Yeah.
So that's going to be you almost answered that. So that's going to be another SDK.
I believe it's going to be a new version of the same SDK. Okay. Yeah, it's still being talked about, because the idea, like long-term, well, I think it's not long-term to be honest with you, but the idea is for Search and Discover to come together. So it will be a unified SDK across the two.
Cool. Because and then it's a classic thing with all the composable, which is sometimes nice, but we're working with a client where they're going from XP and we're going off with Order Cloud and Discover and everything. It's really great, but they really love the experience editor. and they're used to working the same interface. So you know where I'm going with this, right? So, oh, by the way, no, you have to personalization, then we're going to use Discover. You have to jump over and you have to do your HTML or your template over there, but you cannot really the content management system anymore. And if you have to type the URL like you did, Rob, right? So you have to type the URL. You cannot pick the product and it resolves the URL anymore. So, so in the composable world, I guess you would build a tool to help them out. Do we know if there's any admin APIs so you had the options to do that, right? Because I think that's not, they don't have that in the current Discover, but maybe they have that in the new one. Like, so yeah, if you want to help them out and make some nice little tools to them, you could do it if you had an admin API, right? Do you know if you have that in the new one?
I don't think so. It's all front-end APIs, basically. So they can control things in the CEC and see previews of how the individual widgets are going to look and see a stacked show, which I showed, but you wouldn't see it within the whole page context. It's not designed to replace like pages.
No, I know, but you know, I'm going like I feel like, you know, when we're showing that to clients, like it feel like, you know, oh, we're going back in time, right? So I mean, for clients that don't like understand and business-wise understand the whole composable, well, now you have different tools and you have to jump around the different tools to make your stuff work in a daily work. And oh, but it was easier in the old one. You could do personalization is another one, right? So what's it going to do there, right? Anyway, yeah, okay.
Yeah, we're working on getting better alignment between the products, but early days. For now, you're right. They're going to have to jump between different admin interfaces.
Yeah. Cool. So awesome demo. Sorry, are you doing this on? Do you do this on the Discover Sitecore YouTube channel or?
Yes. So I'll do a few subs first. Get a little bit of try and show it around a few people, because then I can get live questions like this, which is always helpful. And then so in about a month's time, I think we'll put it up to YouTube.
Cool. This is awesome. I'd like to see it again. Yep.
So Rob, but at least like, you know, all this product Discovery is also covered under the same SSO login, right? I mean, search and all this product that Sitecore has, that goes through the same authentication.
Not yet.
Is that
it is happening? Search and Discover are going to be pulled in through Portal, so where you'll manage all of your different Sitecore composable products. Currently, it's still separate, but I don't think it's far off. I think it's due to happen like this quarter or next quarter. I think that's due to happen. That's last I heard, anyway.
Okay. Let's see if anyone else has any questions. Anyone else has any questions? Okay, maybe not. So, Rob, one thing that I was thinking is actually A/B testing. How I know that Discover does support A/B testing. So, in your scenario, like, you know, how can you talk about a little bit about how A/B testing will work here? Is it on the component level?
It's both. You can create it at the component level and at the page level. So you can do A/B testing within a component. So within that recommendation component, I could do A/B testing to display different variations of that component to different users.
Okay.
But you can also do it at the page level. So where I created my homepage and added those different widgets to it, I could create different variations with different widgets. So it's both component level and it's at home level, and it's a page level. That makes sense?
Okay. Yep. Awesome presentation. I know it's kind of late here and early in other part of the world. But thanks for your presentation here. And we're lucky to see the first time this JavaScript looks pretty cool. So thanks for doing that.
Thanks for having me. That was really good.